Today, we're going to be talking about your foot strike and what are the key components of a great foot strike in order to improve your speed. And I think this is a really important thing to be able to understand if you want to be a great sprinter, if you want to be faster in general. You have to understand what your foot needs to be doing prior to foot strike, at foot strike, and then as it's toeing off. And based off of what's happening as your foot is striking the ground, gives us a lot better information about what it is that you need to work on, where you might have potential weaknesses, what are some of the drills and exercises and things like that need to be done. And so what we're going to look at here is we have on the right is a view of the foot. And this is from the Bone. This is a great video. I'll put the link down in the description down below. But it essentially tells us about the proper ways that the foot needs to be utilized. And obviously we're going to all be a little bit different, but there's a great concept that I think is really important for us to be able to understand. And essentially it's the difference between pronation and supination. When it comes to pronation, that's going to be when our foot is essentially flat, or when your big toe is going to be below or even with your pinky toe, where supination, the opposite side of that, is going to be when your pinky toe is down and your big toe is up. And what is the big thing is when we're in a closed chain, which means that when the foot's on the ground, it's almost better to be in more of a supinated position, which is the toe a little bit lower onto the ground. So what this video is kind of showing us is the difference between being in closed chain. So you could see here with a closed chain, this is going to help us get a good arch is by being in a little bit more of a supinated position. But when we're foot's off the ground in a open chain position, now we want to be able to have the foot be in a little bit more of a pronated position to make it so now as we're landing, we could land and get into a supinated position, right? So if we're in open chain with our foot off the ground, if our foot's striking with the toe down, right, which would essentially be the opposite of what we're seeing here, if the pinky toe is down, okay, and the big toe is up, then when we land, we go into pronation. And what typically happens is as you're going into pronation, now our weight is going to be shifting backwards, okay, because now we don't really have a lot of muscles there to be able to properly stabilize as we are able to control the foot. And really it makes it so now the deceleration has to happen within more of the hip or more of the ankle, knee, hip, kind of that leg has to really be able to be a part of it, where on the opposite side of the spectrum, if we're in pronation as the foot striking the ground, now when we land, we could land and be a lot more controlled because now we're getting into a supinated position. So when you see athletes like Christoph here, and I just use this because we could see a back view, we could see a lot of athletes that are able to do this. Now that we have the main concept understood, we could see that a lot of these guys, when they're landing, they do such a great job. I mean, we could especially see as he's coming out of the blocks. I mean, he lands and basically has no movement within that heel as it's striking the ground. And the way he's able to do that is because he's landing in a pronated position. And when you can land in a pronated position and then supinate, now the way that your body is going to absorb that is going to be through the hips. Okay, so once you end up having to absorb the weight into the foot and through the ankle, that's what's going to cause the heel to drop. But if we could absorb the weight more through the hip, that's going to make it so we don't end up having to move through the foot, through the ankle joint. And instead, we'll have some movement happening within the hip. But then as we push off, we have more force to be able to generate a strong push off, because as that foot's coming off the ground, we really want to be getting into extension of that hip and also into internal rotation of the leg as the foot is coming off the ground, which will allow that heel to come up. So you can see as he's leaving the ground here, we're getting that heel to go from an inward position to an outward position. We want to make sure that it ends up going straight up and not going so much that now we're facing more towards the outside. We want it to be able to go straight back so then we can bring the leg right up and through. So what are some of the main things that we want to be able to understand here when it comes to foot contact? One is we have to get a good amount of range within the foot. So if we're landing, whether we're landing in pronation or we're landing in supination, and hopefully you guys understand what those two different actions are, essentially landing on the inside part of the foot or landing on the outside part of the foot, we need to be having a degree of movement or degree of action happening within the ankle joint, within the foot joint prior to foot strike in order to have a controlled foot strike in comparison to a reactive foot strike. And so what I mean by that is that that as our foot striking the ground, we want to have the strategy and the understanding of what is going to be happening within that foot strike. So when we're landing, if we can get that ankle, that foot to move prior, now we're going to be in a position, now we can control how we're absorbing the ground in comparison to if we don't have that, right? If our foot just goes right down into the ground as we swing our leg through, now when we strike the ground, we're going to end up having to react. And typically that's going to make it so now the heel drops. Typically that's going to make it so our foot contact time is a lot longer. When the main goal of this video is for you to watch this and be able to understand how to improve your foot contact time. Make it so you spend less time on the ground per step, because all the fastest guys, that's to me the biggest separator when it comes to sprinting, whether it's the start, the drive phase, the top end speed. We see so many people that are missing the speed, the elite level speed, because of how much time they're spending on the ground. And so if we can get a better understanding of how you can correct that and what needs to take place in order to correct that, now you're at least in the position to be able to make that change. If you have no idea what you need to work on, or no idea how to get faster, then you don't know what it is going to be to improve, and therefore you're not going to end up being able to make the change. And so the point of the video today is to make it so now you're going to be able to watch a video or get the information of how you can run faster and what within your foot strike needs to happen in order to have great speed. So again, we need to be controlled with the foot strike as the best that we can. I think we want to be landing more towards the front part of the foot or more towards the toes as possible. Obviously, it's more important during the start to be able to do that. As we go into the drive phase and top end speed, we're not going to be able to run as much on the toes, as much as we're going to be more like ball of the foot is where we're going to be striking the ground. But still, we want to keep the weight off of the heels. And even when we get to top speed, we want to be very effective being able to strike the ground and then transition right back off as effectively as possible. The best way to be able to effectively strike the ground is to make it so we're landing with our foot in a pronated position. And then prior to foot strike, we want to be getting from a dorsiflex position into a plantar flex position. And so let's go ahead and look at that now. So we're getting through here. The foot comes off the ground. This is going to be plantar flexion. Plantar flexion is essentially when the toe is below the heel or the toe is behind the heel, right? It's the extension. If you can think about a calf raise, it's when you're pushing that toe down, lifting that heel up. That's plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion is the other option, or the other way, where you're lifting your toe up. And so as that foot is coming through, we're looking at the left foot here. So we get into plantar flexion. Immediately after we get into plantar flexion, we should be getting right back into dorsiflexion, or should immediately be getting that toe right back up and through the best that we can, and really getting as much height within that toe as we possibly can. So we can see with Christian Coleman here, not when you're going through the start, you're going to be able to basically get that toe to neutral, around neutral. And then from here, we're actually getting into plantar flexion prior to foot strike. And what I mean by that is we're beginning the process of lowering that toe below the heel to, again, make it so we're controlling the foot strike. Okay. And so now as he's hitting the ground, what you want to be doing is you want to be getting the knee to slightly externally rotate, right? Or to turn out slightly. That means that we're able to load through the hip. If the weight ends up coming inwards, we have a little bit more of that with this step. Now we don't see very much movement within the knee going out, and therefore we're going to see the heel drop down. The better job we could do during foot strike of being able to allow that knee coming out makes it so then we could transition right away forward. So, as the foot strikes the ground, like, another thing that will teach athletes a lot is as soon as the foot strikes, we want to get that heel right back up, right? So foot hits the ground here, toe strikes the ground. Immediately we want to be able to control it and get that heel right back up, so then we could push off the ground. So we could effectively push off the ground. I think that one of the things that Christian Coleman does really, really well, we'll go back into at the very beginning, where we can get a good lateral view, is look at how much range he's getting within his toe here, right? So that heel is coming straight up, and then we could also see the range within that foot. And that makes it so now that push off is going to be a lot stronger if you really think about the position of your foot. So like what I'll see with people is as they get into this position, again, and this isn't a great step with Christoph, it's a good step for us to be able to kind of compare and contrast, but in general for sprinting, it wouldn't be the best step. But what we're seeing is more of the weight coming to the outside part of the foot, where, and if you can think about your weight and being able to have momentum going forward, the better we could do of keeping keeping our weight more towards the inside, now we're going to have more force at the push off. And the reason is simply because there's more distance or there's more range there, right? When you're on the outside part of the foot, when you're on your pinky, you run out of space very quickly. So now you can't really push off, right? Because your pinky toe, typically your pinky toe is about this length, and then your big toe is up to here, right? Your foot kind of has this roundedness to it. And so if you're toeing off on your pinky toe, now you don't have the range to be able to really get all the way up onto your foot to really be able to get a strong push off. But the more you have your weight on the inside part of the foot, and you can even do this, you can put one foot down and have more of your weight on the outside part of the foot and then try to push forward. It's not going to be near as forceful as if you have that weight on the inside part of the foot and then push off. And that's where you get that range to your big toe. So that's how you know he's getting a push off on the inside part of the foot, is because you could see the amount of flexion he's having within his big toe. You can't get to that position if you are pushing off the inside part of the foot, within your pinky toe, because the pinky toe is essentially off the ground right now. Not essentially, it is. Right? The big toe, though, is not off the ground. It's on the ground, and that's where he's getting the push. Or you can see here, this is going to be more of a pinky toe, and then because he's pushing off of there, he basically gets an early toe off. Okay? An early toe off means that the foot is coming off the ground before you need it to. Right? Before it is a necessity for that foot to be coming off the ground. And so because of that, now the action of the leg, the action of the foot is going to be wider. Okay, so now we're going to get that knee to be a little bit more off to the side, and we're not going to be as fast with our flexion of the knee. Where if we can get the weight on the big toe to be able to push off, now we're going to be able to get that heel all the way in front of the toe. Okay, I see so many people that toe off with their foot straight up, where we can see with him, he's doing a great job of getting that heel all the way in front of the toe as he's pushing off. So now he's getting a very horizontal action, and now he'll also be able to get a very fast knee bend, right? And be able to get that leg right up and through. Obviously, this is a start, but when he gets to his top speed, he'll be able to really maintain that same level of effectiveness within his toe off. Okay? And I would even make the argument that when he gets to his top speed, talking about Christian Coleman specifically, that he's not getting that same type of push off, that he ends up transitioning off the ground almost too early. Like he could almost benefit from having a little bit longer foot contact time, because then he would be able to generate more force off the ground, which would make it so then he can maintain that top speed to a higher level. But I digress and go back into what we're talking about here, which is that we want to be able to get a great push off and great knee bend as that foot's coming off the ground. And in order to do that, we have to be able to get that effective range within the toe. Then as soon as that foot comes off the ground, we're as fast and as rapidly as we can. We want to get that leg right up and through, toe right up and through, maintain a pronated position. So we don't want to allow the foot to come off to the side or turn. So then we can get right back into foot strike as the foot's hitting the ground. We want to be able to absorb by letting the knee go to the outside, keeping that heel up, so then we can get right back into another push off. And that's going to be the most effective way to improve your foot contact time, the most effective way to be able to strike the ground, and something that we should be very aware of when it comes to our running in general. What are we doing within the foot that could be hampering our performance? And really looking at this from both sides, right? What are we doing on the right leg? What are we doing on the left leg? And how much impact is that having on my sprinting? And then also looking at this within your top end speed, within your drive phase, and within your start, getting a good understanding of all the main parts of your sprinting. I always like to look at Noah Lyles here and how he's running, and we see a lot of the same things here, right? Again, we can only see the side with these guys, but we're seeing that leg come all the way up and through. As he's landing here, he's a little bit more in a supinated position. Okay, so not everybody's going to be landing exactly like this, but what we want to be able to understand is, and again, this is at his top speed. Most people aren't able to do that aren't. When it comes to your top speed, we have a little bit more room for error during foot contact time, because now it's much more about how we're absorbing the weight. And so he's still absorbing into external rotation. He's just starting to get into that supination a little bit earlier to be able to get that weight forward sooner. Okay, so essentially what happens at top speed is it's all about how fast can we get the weight forward, how fast can we get the heel up, and then be able to toe off. It's a race to be able to do that. Some people are going to be able to land more on the inside part of the foot. Some people are going to be able to land more on the outside part of the foot. But a lot of that, I think, has to do with what type of foot position are we in. Like here, he's much more in a pronated position. As he lands, he gets that heel right back up and then transitions right off. And again, we want to be able to understand that it's not always about being able to land in the with our foot in the correct or most perfect position, right? It's not like Noah Lyles is doing something bad. It's how can we become more effective within our foot strike? What can we do to be able to make some adjustments, to be able to make some changes to be able to improve our speed, right? So we can see again a little bit more on the outside part of the foot here, not as pronated, but he does a good job of still being able to absorb. See how he's absorbing into external rotation within the knee and then gets the heel up, transitions right back off. So the understanding here, the goal here is what can we do to make it so we can get the foot off the ground faster? Okay. If you don't have a strategy right now, then I would make the argument that this will help you improve your strategy. Okay. This will help make it so now you could actually have a strategy that you're implementing into your foot contact time. And this is something you could be doing and practicing in a variety of different ways. I'm going to make a video short on it here in the next few days, maybe in the next week at the longest, that will get more information about what are some good drills, what are some good exercises. But, it's pretty simple. Single leg bounds, single leg jumps, things like that. We want to be aware of where we're landing on the foot and what we're doing within our foot contact to make it so we could be very effective with the time. So then we're not wasting our time on the ground. And instead, we're being very quick, very effective within the foot strike to make it so we can improve the speed. Again, most people need to work on their foot strike when it comes to with their foot contact time with their foot strike in order to have that elite speed. They don't have an issue with their turnover speed. Their legs, once they come off the ground, are able to move just as fast as a lot of these top guys. The issue is, one, they're not generating as much force in the ground, so therefore they're not picking up as much distance per step, and they spend too much time on the ground, which also makes it so they're just not able to run as fast. So by being able to correct those two things, again, this is a strategy to be able to help you do that. You should be able to improve your speed, and you should be able to do it in a very quick manner because you went from a place of basically not having any awareness to now having a strategy to make it so now you can improve your speed.